came to him in the middle of a storm, beautiful, shaken, and holding a secret that could shatter everything he thought he knew. He wanted only to solve the case, but from the moment their eyes met, nothing about this investigation would ever be simple again. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The rain drummed against the cobblestones of Boston with a relentless rhythm that seemed to match the beating of Detective William Hartford's heart as he stood beneath the gas lamp outside the Ashford mansion. It was the autumn of 1895, and the city wore its seasonal cloak of amber and crimson leaves that now lay sodden and dark upon the ground. William pulled his wool coat tighter around his tall frame, his sharp blue eyes fixed upon the imposing Victorian structure before him. At 32 years of age, he had built a reputation as one of Boston's most dedicated investigators, a man who pursued truth with the same fervor that others pursued wealth or fame. The Ashford case had consumed his thoughts for 3 weeks now. Jonathan Ashford, a prominent banker, had vanished without explanation from his own study on a Tuesday evening, leaving behind nothing but an overturned inkwell and a half-written letter that made no sense. The police had nearly closed the case, declaring it a simple matter of a man abandoning his responsibilities. But William knew better. Men like Ashford did not simply disappear. They left traces, clues, threads that the careful investigator could follow. William ascended the marble steps and lifted the brass knocker, letting it fall twice against the heavy oak door. The sound echoed through the evening air, mingling with the patter of rain. Moments passed before the door swung open, revealing not the butler he expected, but a young woman whose presence struck him with unexpected force. She stood framed in the warm gaslight that spilled from within, her figure slender and graceful in a deep green dress that spoke of modest elegance rather than ostentatious wealth. Her hair, the color of polished mahogany, was arranged in the fashion of the day, though several rebellious strands had escaped to frame a face that was at once beautiful and somehow haunted. But it was her eyes that held William captive. Eyes of such a remarkable shade of gray that they seemed almost silver in the lamplight, and within them lay something he could not quite name. A secret, perhaps, a sorrow, a knowledge of things unspoken. Detective Hartford, I presume. Her voice carried the refined accent of education, yet there was a tremor beneath it, subtle as a leaf quivering in a breeze. I am Eleanor Ashford. Please, do come in from the rain. William removed his hat as he stepped into the entrance hall, water dripping from the brim onto the marble floor. The interior of the mansion was exactly as he had imagined it would be, rich mahogany paneling, portraits of stern ancestors gazing down from the walls, a grand staircase that curved upward into shadow. Yet despite its grandeur, there was something melancholy about the place, as though the very walls absorbed the grief of its inhabitants. Miss Ashford, William began, his voice steady and professional, despite the strange flutter in his chest that her presence had caused. Thank you for agreeing to see me at this late hour. I know the police have already questioned you, but I hoped you might permit me to ask a few additional questions about your uncle's disappearance. Eleanor closed the door against the rain and turned to face him fully. In the brighter light of the hallway, he could see that her beauty was not the delicate, fragile sort so prized in society, but rather something more substantial. There was intelligence in those remarkable eyes, and a strength in the set of her jaw that suggested she had faced difficulties that would have broken lesser souls. Uncle Jonathan raised me after my parents passed when I was 12, she said quietly, leading him toward a sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth. He has been missing for 23 days now, and each day that passes, I fear more greatly for his fate. The police believe he simply left of his own accord, but that is impossible. He would never abandon me. Never. The conviction in her voice was absolute, and William found himself believing her without question. He settled into the chair she indicated, watching as she took her own seat across from him, her hands folded primly in her lap, though he could see the white knuckles that betrayed her tension. Tell me about the evening he disappeared, William said gently, withdrawing his notebook from his coat pocket. Every detail you can remember, no matter how insignificant it might seem. Eleanor drew a slow breath, and William watched as she seemed to retreat into memory, her eyes growing distant. It was a Tuesday evening, October the 8th. Uncle Jonathan had returned from the bank at his usual hour, shortly after 6 o'clock. We dined together as we always did. He seemed preoccupied, though not distressed. After dinner, He retired to his study to attend to some correspondence. I went to the music room to practice my piano for perhaps an hour. She paused, and William saw her hands tighten further. When I went to bid him good night at 9 o'clock, I found the study door slightly ajar. That was unusual, as Uncle Jonathan always kept it closed when he was working. I knocked, but received no answer. When I entered, the room was empty. His desk chair was overturned, and ink had spilled across the blotter, ruining whatever he had been writing. The window was closed and locked from the inside. The servants had heard nothing unusual. William wrote quickly, his trained mind already working through possibilities. And the letter he was writing? May I see it? Eleanor rose with fluid grace and crossed to a small writing desk near the window. She withdrew a piece of paper, now stained with black ink that had spread across most of the page, rendering it largely illegible. She handed it to William, and as their fingers briefly touched, he felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with the investigation and everything to do with the woman before him. He examined the letter carefully, tilting it toward the firelight. Through the ink stains he could make out only fragments. Must tell Eleanor the truth about, and further down, the document hidden in. The rest was completely obscured. Have you any idea what truth he meant to tell you? William asked, raising his eyes to meet hers. Eleanor's expression flickered with something that might have been fear, or perhaps guilt. She returned to her seat, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I have wondered about that every night since he disappeared. There were times when Uncle Jonathan would begin to tell me something about my parents, about their deaths, and then stop himself, as though he had thought better of it. I always assumed he was simply trying to protect me from painful memories. But now you suspect there was more to it, William prompted gently. Yes. The word emerged with such weight that William felt the gravity of it. Detective Hartford, I believe my uncle discovered something dangerous, and that his disappearance is connected to whatever truth he intended to reveal to me. I believe he was taken, not that he left willingly, and I believe that someone in this city knows exactly what happened to him. William studied her face in the firelight, noting the determined set of her features despite the fear he could see lurking in those extraordinary eyes. There was courage in this woman, a quality he had encountered rarely enough to recognize and admire it when he did. Miss Ashford, if what you suspect is true, then you may be in danger as well, he said seriously. If someone wished to silence your uncle before he could reveal this truth to you, they may fear that he already shared it with you, or that you might discover it on your own. I know, Eleanor replied, and now her voice was steady, resolute. That is why I contacted you specifically, Detective Hartford. I have heard of your reputation for discretion and for seeing cases through to their conclusion, no matter what obstacles present themselves. I need someone who will not abandon this investigation, who will help me find my uncle and uncover whatever truth he died trying to reveal. Died. William caught the word immediately. You believe him dead? Eleanor's composure wavered, and for a moment, vulnerability showed through her carefully maintained facade. I do not wish to believe it, but I must be realistic. Whatever Uncle Jonathan uncovered, it was significant enough that someone was willing to make him disappear. I can only pray that he is being held somewhere, that there is still time to find him alive. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney as William considered the woman before him. In his years as a detective, he had encountered many clients, many families desperate for answers. But something about Eleanor Ashford stirred in him a protective instinct he had not felt since he had last allowed himself to care about someone beyond the professional requirements of his occupation. That had ended badly, and he had sworn to keep his heart separate from his work. Yet already, after mere minutes in this woman's presence, he could feel that resolution weakening. I will take your case, Miss Ashford, he said, and was rewarded with the first genuine smile he had seen from her. A smile that transformed her entire countenance and made his heart beat faster despite his best efforts to remain detached. But I must ask you to be completely honest with me about everything you know or suspect. Even the smallest detail might prove crucial. Of course, Eleanor agreed immediately. I want nothing more than to find Uncle Jonathan, and I will help you in any way I can. William stood, tucking his notebook back into his coat. Then, with your permission, I would like to examine your uncle's study. Tomorrow, in daylight, when I can see everything clearly. For tonight, I want you to lock your doors and windows, and be cautious of anyone who approaches you with questions about your uncle or his business affairs. Eleanor rose as well, and as she did, She swayed slightly, her hand reaching out to steady herself on the arm of her chair. Instantly, William was at her side, his hand supporting her elbow. "Forgive me," she murmured, and he could see now the dark circles beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worry. "I have not been sleeping well since Uncle Jonathan disappeared." "That is entirely understandable," William said softly, and he found himself reluctant to release her arm even as she steadied herself. "You have been carrying this burden alone for too long, but you are not alone now, Miss Ashford. I give you my word that I will find your uncle, and I will uncover whatever truth he wished to tell you." She looked up at him then, and in the firelight, her eyes seemed to hold entire worlds within them, mysteries and sorrows and hopes that called to something deep within his soul. "Thank you, Detective Hartford," she whispered. "You cannot know what it means to me to finally have someone who believes me, who will help me search for the truth." As William prepared to leave, stepping back out into the rain-soaked night, he carried with him not only the puzzle of Jonathan Ashford's disappearance, but also the image of Eleanor's face, those haunting silver eyes, and the inexplicable feeling that his life had just changed in ways he could not yet comprehend. The case had become more than merely another investigation to solve. It had become personal, and William Hartford, despite all his experience and professional detachment, found himself already caring deeply about the beautiful, courageous woman who had appeared before him with a secret in her eyes. The morning sun broke through the clouds with reluctant persistence, casting pale golden light across Boston's wet streets as William Hartford's carriage arrived once more at the Ashford mansion. He had spent the previous night poring over every police report, every witness statement, finding nothing that satisfied his investigative instincts. Something had been overlooked, some crucial detail that would unlock this mystery, and he was determined to find it. Eleanor met him at the door herself, dressed in a simple day dress of deep blue that somehow made her eyes appear even more luminous than they had by firelight. She looked slightly more rested, though the worry lines around her mouth had not diminished. "Good morning, Detective Hartford," she greeted him with a formality that seemed at odds with the intensity of their conversation the previous evening. "I have had the study prepared for your examination. Nothing has been touched since that night." "Thank you, Miss Ashford," William replied, removing his hat as he entered. "And please, if we are to work together on this investigation, I hope you will call me William. Formality can sometimes create distance when we need openness and trust." A faint blush colored Eleanor's cheeks, and she nodded. "Then you must call me Eleanor. Though I confess such informality feels strange. Uncle Jonathan was always most particular about proper forms of address." "Your uncle sounds like a man of strong principles," William observed as she led him up the grand staircase toward the study on the second floor. "He was," Eleanor said softly. She corrected herself firmly. "He is a man of principle. I must not speak of him in the past tense, as though I have already lost hope." The study proved to be exactly as William had imagined it. Shelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a massive oak desk positioned before tall windows that overlooked the garden, and the lingering scent of pipe tobacco that spoke of its absent occupant. The overturned chair had been righted, but the ink stain on the desk blotter remained, a dark reminder of the violence or haste that had attended Jonathan Ashford's disappearance. William moved slowly around the room, his trained eyes taking in every detail. Eleanor stood near the doorway, watching him with an intensity that made him acutely aware of her presence. He could feel her hope, her desperate need for him to find something the others had missed. "Tell me about your uncle's work at the bank," William said as he examined the books on the shelves, running his fingers along their spines. "What exactly did he do there?" "He managed accounts for some of Boston's most prominent families," Eleanor replied. "He had been with the Boston Merchants Bank for nearly 30 years. His reputation was impeccable. He handled estates, trusts, investments. People trusted him with their most confidential financial matters." William paused, turning to look at her. "And in the days before his disappearance, did he mention any particular client or account that troubled him?" Eleanor's brow furrowed in concentration. "Not directly. But I remember now, there was an evening perhaps a week before he vanished when he came home looking deeply disturbed. When I asked what was wrong, he said only that he had discovered a discrepancy in some accounts, something that did not align properly. He seemed torn about what to do. He said that revealing what he had found might destroy innocent people, but concealing it would be a betrayal of his principles." William's pulse quickened. "Did he mention which accounts? Which families?" "No. Eleanor said regretfully. He said it was better that I did not know. He wanted to protect me from involvement. Oh, William, do you think that whatever he discovered at the bank led to his disappearance? The use of his given name sent an unexpected warmth through William's chest. I think it very likely, he said, moving to examine the desk more closely. If your uncle uncovered evidence of embezzlement or fraud involving powerful people, they would have strong motivation to silence him. He carefully opened each drawer of the desk, finding them orderly and methodically arranged. Account ledgers, personal correspondence, documents relating to various estates. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious until his fingers encountered a small irregularity in the back of the bottom drawer. Pressing carefully, he heard a soft click, and a false bottom lifted to reveal a hidden compartment. Eleanor, he said quietly, and she was immediately at his side, close enough that he could catch the faint scent of lavender from her hair. Did you know about this? No, she breathed, her eyes wide with astonishment. I had no idea Uncle Jonathan had a secret compartment in his desk. William carefully withdrew the contents, a small leather journal and a folded document sealed with wax. His hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal and unfolded the paper, Eleanor leaning closer to read over his shoulder. The document was a birth certificate, yellowed with age, but it was the names upon it that caused Eleanor to gasp and William to feel his investigative instincts surge with sudden understanding. This cannot be, Eleanor whispered, her face draining of color. This birth certificate. It says that my mother's maiden name was not Whitmore, as I always believed, but rather Ashford. It says she was Jonathan Ashford's sister, not merely a distant cousin as he always told me. William's mind raced through the implications, which would make Jonathan your uncle by blood, not by courtesy. But why would he conceal this? Why maintain the fiction that your mother was only distantly related? Eleanor reached for the journal with trembling hands, and William helped steady her as she opened it. The pages were filled with Jonathan Ashford's precise handwriting, entries dating back more than 20 years. May I? William asked gently, and Eleanor nodded, seemingly unable to speak. He began to read aloud, his voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. June 15th, 1873. Today I made a promise to my dying sister that weighs upon my soul. Margaret begged me to keep Eleanor safe, to never let her know the truth about her father. She feared that knowledge would destroy the child, would mark her with a shame she does not deserve. I have agreed, though it means living a lie. I will raise Eleanor as my ward, will tell her that her mother was but a distant cousin, and will take the secret of her true parentage to my grave. But God help me, the lie burns in my throat every time I look into that innocent child's eyes. Eleanor's legs seemed to give way beneath her, and William quickly guided her to the leather chair near the window, his hand supporting her elbow with gentle firmness. She looked up at him with those extraordinary eyes now swimming with tears. My father, she whispered. All these years, Uncle Jonathan never spoke of my father except to say he died in a railway accident shortly after I was born. But this journal suggests there is more to the story, something shameful that my mother wished to hide. William knelt beside her chair, his professional detachment crumbling in the face of her distress. Without thinking, he took her hand in his and was surprised when she gripped it tightly, as though he were an anchor in a suddenly turbulent sea. Eleanor, whatever we discover, it does not change who you are, he said with quiet conviction. You are not responsible for the actions or circumstances of your parents. You are your own person, remarkable and courageous, and no revelation about the past can diminish that. She looked at him with such gratitude and vulnerability that William felt something shift fundamentally in his heart. This was no longer merely a case to solve. This woman, with her strength and her sorrow, had somehow claimed a place in his feelings that went far beyond professional concern. Will you help me discover the truth? Eleanor asked softly. All of it? Even if it proves painful? I will, William promised. We will find your uncle, and we will uncover whatever secrets he was trying to protect you from. But we will face them together, Eleanor. You do not have to bear this alone. The moment stretched between them, charged with an awareness that both thrilled and terrified William. He had sworn to keep his heart separate from his work, yet here he was, kneeling beside this woman, holding her hand, and feeling emotions he had thought himself too disciplined to experience. A discreet cough from the doorway broke the spell. They both looked up to find the butler, an elderly man with silver hair and a dignified bearing, standing at the threshold. "Forgive the interruption, Miss Eleanor," the butler said with a slight bow, "but there is a gentleman here to see you. A Mr. Charles Blackwood from the Boston Merchants Bank. He says the matter is most urgent." Eleanor released William's hand and stood quickly, composing herself with visible effort. "Show him to the drawing room, Patterson. We will be down momentarily." As the butler departed, Eleanor turned to William, her expression now showing both fear and determination. "Charles Blackwood is the bank's senior director, Uncle Jonathan's direct superior. He has never called at the house before. This cannot be coincidence." William gathered the journal and birth certificate carefully, tucking them inside his coat. "Then let us see what Mr. Blackwood has to say. But Eleanor, let me lead the conversation. Do not reveal what we have just discovered. Not yet. If Blackwood is involved in whatever your uncle uncovered, we must be cautious." They descended the stairs together, and William found himself walking close beside Eleanor. Protective instincts he had not known he possessed rising to the surface. As they entered the drawing room, they found a man of perhaps 50 years standing before the fireplace, his bearing that of someone accustomed to authority and respect. Charles Blackwood turned as they entered, his sharp eyes taking in both Eleanor and William with calculating assessment. He was handsome in a severe way, his dark hair graying at the temples, his expensive suit impeccably tailored, but there was something cold in his expression, something that immediately raised William's suspicions. "Miss Ashford," Blackwood said smoothly, offering a slight bow. "Thank you for receiving me on such short notice. I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all, Mr. Blackwood," Eleanor replied with admirable composure. "May I introduce Detective William Hartford? He has agreed to assist me in searching for my uncle." Blackwood's eyes narrowed fractionally as they fixed on William. "A private detective? I was under the impression the police had concluded their investigation." "They have," William said evenly, meeting Blackwood's gaze without flinching. "But Miss Ashford remains unconvinced that her uncle left voluntarily, and I am inclined to agree with her assessment. I wonder, Mr. Blackwood, what brings you here today? Have you information about Mr. Jonathan Ashford's whereabouts?" A flash of something unreadable crossed Blackwood's features before his expression smoothed into professional concern. "Alas, no. I come rather with a matter of business that requires Miss Ashford's immediate attention. It pertains to certain accounts that Jonathan was managing before his unfortunate disappearance." "What sort of accounts?" Eleanor asked, and William admired the steadiness of her voice despite what they had just discovered upstairs. "Estate accounts, primarily," Blackwood said, his tone carefully neutral. "There are documents that require signatures, decisions that must be made. As Jonathan's heir and the person currently residing in this house that was held in trust by him, certain legal matters now fall to you, Miss Ashford. The bank requires that you come to our offices tomorrow to review these matters and sign the necessary papers." William's instincts flared with warning. "Tomorrow? Surely such matters could wait until Mr. Ashford is found, or until a more appropriate time has passed." Blackwood's smile did not reach his eyes. "I am afraid the law does not permit such delays, Detective Hartford. There are creditors, beneficiaries, legal requirements that must be met. Miss Ashford's presence is required tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I trust that will not be inconvenient." Eleanor glanced at William, and he could see the question in her eyes. He gave the slightest shake of his head, but Eleanor seemed to understand that they had no choice but to comply, at least for the moment. "I will be there, Mr. Blackwood," Eleanor said quietly. "Tomorrow at 10 o'clock. "Excellent," Blackwood replied, though his expression suggested satisfaction rather than relief. "I shall see you then, Miss Ashford. Detective Hartford, I trust you will continue your investigation with the discretion and care it deserves. Jonathan Ashford was a valued member of our institution, and we all hope for his safe return." As Patterson showed Blackwood out, William moved to the window and watched the bank director climb into a waiting carriage, his mind working through possibilities and suspicions. "He knows something," Eleanor said softly, coming to stand beside him. "I could see it in his eyes. He knows what happened to Uncle Jonathan." "I believe you are right," William agreed, his jaw tightening with determination. "And I believe that whatever your uncle discovered, it involves Blackwood directly. The question is, what exactly did Jonathan find, and where is he now?" Eleanor turned to face him fully, and in the morning light streaming through the window, William was struck again by her beauty, but more than that, by the strength and intelligence that radiated from her very being. This was no helpless woman waiting to be rescued, This was a woman who would fight alongside him to uncover the truth, regardless of the personal cost. "William," she said, and the intimacy of his name on her lips sent warmth flooding through him. "I am frightened, but I am also grateful beyond words that you are here, that I do not have to face this alone. Whatever we discover tomorrow at the bank, whatever truths emerge about my family and my past, I want you to know that your presence gives me courage." William found himself reaching out to gently touch her cheek, a gesture far more intimate than professional propriety allowed, yet one he could not prevent. "Eleanor, I promise you, we will find the truth. We will find your uncle. And whatever dangers we will face them together." She leaned into his touch for just a moment, her eyes closing, and William felt his heart constrict with emotions he had thought himself incapable of feeling. In the space of 24 hours, this remarkable woman had breached every defense he had carefully constructed around his heart, and he found that he did not regret it in the slightest. Tomorrow they would go to the bank. Tomorrow they would confront whatever conspiracy had claimed Jonathan Ashford. But today, in this moment, standing in the morning sunlight with Eleanor's trust and hope resting upon him, William Hartford made a silent vow that he would protect this woman with everything he possessed, and that somehow he would ensure that their story ended not in tragedy, but in the happiness that both of them deserved. The Boston Merchants Bank stood like a fortress of marble and granite on Tremont Street, its imposing columns and ornate facade speaking of wealth, power, and secrets carefully guarded behind locked vaults. William arrived at the Ashford mansion precisely at 9:30 the following morning, finding Eleanor already prepared, dressed in a somber gray suit that lent her an air of dignified authority, despite the anxiety he could see flickering in her remarkable eyes. "Are you ready?" William asked gently as Patterson helped her with her coat. "As ready as I shall ever be," Eleanor replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "I spent the night reading more of Uncle Jonathan's journal. William, the entries become increasingly distressed as they approach the date of his disappearance. He wrote of discovering something terrible, something that involved not just embezzlement, but a conspiracy that reached into some of Boston's most respected families. He feared for his life, and he feared even more for mine." William's jaw tightened as he offered Eleanor his arm, which she accepted gratefully. "Then we must be extraordinarily careful today. I want you to sign nothing without my review, agree to nothing without careful consideration. If Blackwood or anyone else at the bank pressures you, defer to me." The carriage ride through Boston's busy streets was tense with unspoken concerns. William found himself acutely aware of Eleanor's presence beside him, the way her shoulder occasionally brushed against his as the carriage swayed, the faint lavender scent that had become intoxicatingly familiar. He had investigated dozens of cases over his career, faced dangerous criminals and complex mysteries, but never had he felt this combination of professional determination and personal investment. The realization that his feelings for Eleanor had deepened beyond mere attraction into something far more profound both thrilled and terrified him. "William," Eleanor said softly as they approached the bank, "whatever we discover today, I want you to know that meeting you has been the one bright spot in this terrible ordeal. Your strength gives me courage." He turned to look at her fully, and for a moment the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "Eleanor, you possess more courage than you realize, but I am honored to stand beside you today and for as long as you need me." The words hung between them, laden with meanings neither quite dared to fully acknowledge, yet both understood. The carriage came to a stop before the bank's grand entrance, and William helped Eleanor descend, his hand lingering on hers perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. Inside, the bank was a cathedral of commerce, all polished wood and gleaming brass, the air heavy with the scent of ink and paper and money. A clerk immediately approached, recognizing Eleanor and leading them through the main hall toward a private corridor that accessed the senior offices. William's detective instincts were on high alert, noting the nervous glances of employees, the way conversations seemed to stop as they passed, the atmosphere of tension that permeated the building. Charles Blackwood's office was on the third floor, a spacious room appointed with expensive furniture and paintings that spoke of wealth and privilege. Blackwood himself rose from behind his massive desk as they entered, his smile polished, but his eyes calculating. "Miss Ashford, Detective Hartford," punctual as expected, Blackwood said smoothly. "Please, be seated. I have the documents prepared for your review and signature." But as Eleanor moved toward the indicated chairs, William noticed something that made his blood run cold. On a side table near the window lay a leather portfolio, and protruding slightly from it was a corner of paper that bore the distinctive watermark he had seen on the hidden birth certificate. His mind raced with implications even as he maintained an expression of calm attentiveness. "Before Miss Ashford signs anything," William said evenly, "I would like to understand the exact nature of these documents and why they require such urgent attention." Blackwood's expression hardened fractionally. "The documents concern the disposition of certain trust accounts that Jonathan Ashford managed. As his legal ward, Miss Ashford must now assume responsibility for these accounts or appoint the bank as executor. It is entirely routine, I assure you." "Routine," William repeated, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "And yet in all the years Mr. Ashford managed these accounts, no such signatures were required. What has changed, Mr. Blackwood?" The tension in the room thickened perceptibly. Eleanor sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, but William could see the rapid pulse at her throat that betrayed her fear. He moved slightly closer to her, a subtle but protective gesture that did not escape Blackwood's notice. "What has changed, Detective, is that Jonathan Ashford has disappeared," Blackwood said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "The bank cannot allow significant accounts to remain in limbo indefinitely. We have responsibilities to our clients, legal obligations that must be met." "I see," William said thoughtfully. "And these clients whose accounts are in question, might I ask their names?" "That information is confidential," Blackwood replied sharply. "Banking privacy is sacrosanct. Surely you understand that." William stood and began to pace slowly around the room, his movements casual but his attention focused. "Of course, though I wonder if your commitment to privacy extends to protecting clients who may have engaged in criminal activity. Tell me, Mr. Blackwood, what did Jonathan Ashford discover in these accounts that so disturbed him? What discrepancies did he find?" Blackwood's face flushed with anger. "I have no idea what you are implying, Detective Hartford. Jonathan Ashford was an excellent employee, but he had become erratic in recent months, making wild accusations without foundation. His disappearance, while unfortunate, may well have been the result of a disturbed mental state rather than any fictional conspiracy." "My uncle was not disturbed," Eleanor suddenly spoke, her voice ringing with conviction as she stood to face Blackwood. "He was one of the sanest, most principled men I have ever known. And I will not allow you to defame his character or reputation, Mr. Blackwood. Whatever he discovered, whatever truth he was trying to protect, I will find it, and I will ensure that justice is served." The force of her words, the courage blazing in her eyes, made William's heart swell with admiration and something deeper, something that felt remarkably like love. In that moment, seeing Eleanor stand firm against a man who clearly wished to intimidate her, William knew with absolute certainty that he had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with this extraordinary woman. Blackwood's expression turned cold and dangerous. "Miss Ashford, I would advise you to be very careful about making accusations you cannot substantiate. Your uncle is gone. You are alone in the world with no family to protect you. It would be wise to accept the bank's assistance in managing your affairs, rather than pursuing investigations that could prove detrimental to your well-being." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air like poison. William moved immediately to Eleanor's side, his tall frame and commanding presence making his protective stance unmistakable. "Miss Ashford is not alone, Mr. Blackwood. She has me, and I assure you, any attempt to harm or intimidate her will be met with the full force of the law." "Now I suggest you tell us the truth about what Jonathan Ashford discovered, and more importantly, where he is being held." "Held?" Blackwood's laugh was harsh and mirthless. "You are as delusional as Jonathan became. I know nothing of his whereabouts, and I resent the implication that I or anyone at this bank had anything to do with his disappearance." But even as Blackwood spoke, William's sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement beyond the office door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, he glimpsed what appeared to be a guard, armed and watching. His instincts screamed danger, and he knew with sudden clarity that they had walked into a trap. "Eleanor," William said quietly but urgently, "we are leaving, now." Blackwood moved to block the door, his pretense of civility evaporating entirely. "I am afraid I cannot allow that, Detective Hartford. You have become far too curious about matters that do not concern you, and Miss Ashford has information that she does not even realize she possesses. information that could destroy some of this city's most powerful men. We cannot permit either of you to leave until certain assurances have been made." William's hand moved instinctively to his coat where he carried a revolver. But before he could draw it, the office door burst open and 3 men entered, rough-looking individuals who were clearly not bank employees. Eleanor gasped and moved closer to William, who immediately positioned himself between her and the intruders. "There is no need for violence," Blackwood said smoothly, though his eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Simply sign the documents, Miss Ashford, transferring authority over your uncle's accounts to the bank. Do so, and you will both be free to leave unharmed." "And if I refuse?" Eleanor asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the fear William could feel radiating from her. "Then I fear we shall be forced to detain you both until you become more reasonable," Blackwood replied. "The bank has private rooms in the basement where difficult conversations can be conducted with complete privacy. I assure you no one will hear or interrupt us there." William's mind raced through options, calculating odds and possibilities. They were outnumbered, trapped in an office 3 floors above the street with no easy means of escape. But surrender was not in his nature, and he would die before allowing Eleanor to be harmed. "The documents she would sign," William said, stalling for time as his eyes searched the room for anything that might aid them. "They would give you control over accounts containing embezzled funds, would they not? Funds stolen from estates and trusts over many years, hidden in complex transactions that Jonathan Ashford finally unraveled. That is what this is truly about. Not routine banking matters, but covering up massive fraud and theft." Blackwood's expression twisted with anger. Jonathan should have kept silent. He should have understood that some truths are too dangerous to reveal. The families involved, the amounts of money in question, the scandal it would cause. It would destroy institutions that have stood for generations. He refused to see reason, refused to understand that sometimes the greater good requires certain compromises. "Compromises," Eleanor breathed, her voice filled with horror and understanding. "You mean lies, theft, and when my uncle would not participate in your conspiracy, when he threatened to expose you all, you had him taken. Where is he, Mr. Blackwood? What have you done with my uncle?" For a moment, something like regret flickered across Blackwood's features. "Jonathan is alive, Miss Ashford. He is being held at a location where he can do no harm. We are not murderers. We simply need time to relocate certain funds, to adjust certain records. Once that is complete, once the trail has been sufficiently obscured, your uncle will be released with the understanding that revealing what he knows would implicate him as well. It is all quite civilized, really." "Civilized," William repeated, his voice hard with contempt. "Kidnapping, threats, fraud on a massive scale. You have an interesting definition of civilization, Mr. Blackwood." "Enough talking," one of the hired men growled, pulling a knife from his belt. "Let's take them to the basement and be done with it." But William had been waiting for just such a moment of distraction. His hand shot out, grabbing a heavy glass paperweight from Blackwood's desk, and hurled it with precise aim at the gas lamp mounted on the wall. The glass shattered, and suddenly the room was plunged into chaos as flames began to lick up the expensive wallpaper. "Fire!" someone shouted from the hallway, and immediately the building's alarm bells began to ring, their clamorous sound echoing through the bank. In the confusion, William grabbed Eleanor's hand and pulled her toward the window. "Can you climb?" he asked urgently. "I will find a way," Eleanor replied with fierce determination. The window opened onto a narrow ledge that ran along the building's exterior, a decorative architectural feature that now became their only means of escape. William helped Eleanor through the window first, his heart in his throat as he watched her step carefully onto the ledge, her skirts making the movement treacherous. Then he followed, pulling the window closed behind them as Blackwood's angry shouts and the growing commotion of the fire filled the office. The ledge was perhaps 8 inches wide, and below them, the street lay 3 stories down, far enough that a fall would certainly be fatal. Eleanor pressed herself against the building's facade, her face pale, but her jaw set with determination. William moved to position himself between her and the edge, his body shielding hers as they began to edge carefully along the ledge toward the building's corner where an old iron fire escape clung to the brick. "Do not look down," William instructed gently. "Look at me, Eleanor. Focus on my voice." Her gray eyes met his, and in them he saw trust, absolute and unwavering. "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice shook slightly. Not while you were with me. The distance to the fire escape was perhaps 20 feet, but it felt like miles as they inched along the narrow ledge. Behind them, they could hear the window being thrown open, Blackwood's voice shouting orders. But the fire had spread quickly, smoke now billowing from the office, and the confusion within the bank was growing by the moment. Finally, mercifully, they reached the fire escape. William helped Eleanor onto the iron platform, then followed quickly, beginning their rapid descent even as bank employees and curious onlookers gathered on the street below, drawn by the alarm bells and the smoke now visible from the upper windows. When their feet finally touched solid ground, Eleanor sagged against William, her arms going around him in an embrace born of relief and residual fear. William held her tightly, his own heart racing from their narrow escape, acutely aware that he had nearly lost her, that the woman he loved had been in mortal danger. "We must leave," William said urgently, though he was reluctant to release her. "Blackwood will send men after us as soon as he can. We need to reach safety and then plan our next move." Eleanor pulled back slightly, looking up at him with eyes that now blazed not with fear but with fierce determination. "We know where my uncle is being held, or at least we know that Blackwood knows. We must find him, William. We must rescue him and expose this entire conspiracy." "We will," William promised, taking her hand firmly in his. "But first we need help. I know a magistrate, an honest man who cannot be bought or intimidated. We will go to him, tell him everything we know, and secure proper legal authority to search for your uncle. This has gone beyond a private investigation, Eleanor. This is now a matter for the law." They made their way quickly through Boston's crowded streets, staying to busy thoroughfares where they would be harder to follow. William kept Eleanor close to his side, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of pursuit. His mind was already working through everything they had learned, piecing together the conspiracy that had ensnared Jonathan Ashford. The magistrate, Judge Samuel Warren, was an old friend of William's late father, a man known throughout Boston for his integrity and unwavering commitment to justice. His chambers were in the courthouse on Pemberton Square, and William breathed a sigh of relief when they finally arrived at the imposing building, knowing that within its walls they would find sanctuary and support. Judge Warren received them immediately when William sent word of the urgency of their situation. He was a man in his 60s, with a mane of white hair and penetrating blue eyes that had witnessed decades of human nature in all its variety. He listened intently as William and Eleanor recounted everything that had transpired, his expression growing increasingly grave. "This is a serious matter indeed," Judge Warren said when they had finished. "If what you say is true, we are dealing with corruption at the highest levels of Boston's financial establishment. Charles Blackwood comes from one of the city's oldest families. Making accusations against him without ironclad proof would be dangerous. We have Jonathan Ashford's journal," William said, producing the leather volume from his coat. "It documents his discovery of the fraud, his growing fear, everything leading up to his disappearance, and we have the birth certificate that suggests Eleanor's true parentage was hidden for reasons connected to this conspiracy." Eleanor leaned forward urgently. "Judge Warren, my uncle is being held prisoner somewhere. Every moment we delay is another moment he suffers, another opportunity for these men to cover their tracks or worse. Please, I am begging you, help us save him." The judge was silent for a long moment, studying Eleanor's face with an expression of compassion and calculation. Finally, he nodded decisively. "Very well. I will issue warrants for Charles Blackwood's arrest and for searches of both the bank and his private residence. But, Detective Hartford, I want you to accompany the police in this matter. Your knowledge of the case will be invaluable, and I trust you to see that justice is properly served." Relief flooded through William, though it was tempered by concern for Eleanor's safety. "Your Honor, Miss Ashford should remain here under your protection while this operation is conducted. If Blackwood's men are searching for her—" "No," Eleanor interrupted firmly, standing to face William with blazing eyes. "I will not hide while you risk yourself to save my uncle. Where you go, I go, William. We are in this together." William wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she remain safe, but looking into those remarkable gray eyes, seeing the courage and determination that matched his own, he found he could not. This was not a woman who needed protection from life, but rather a partner who would stand beside him facing whatever came. "Together," he agreed softly, and the word felt like a promise. a vow that extended far beyond the immediate crisis to encompass a future he had only just begun to imagine. Within the hour, a contingent of police officers had been assembled, warrants issued, and plans made. Judge Warren, exercising his considerable authority, personally accompanied the operation, lending it the weight of judicial oversight that would prevent any attempt at interference or cover-up. As they prepared to depart, William took a moment to speak privately with Eleanor. "Whatever we face today," he said, taking both her hands in his, "I want you to know that meeting you has changed my life. You have awakened feelings in me that I thought long dead, have made me believe again in possibilities I had abandoned." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, though she smiled through them. "And you have been my strength, my courage, my hope in the darkest time of my life. Whatever happens, William, whatever truths we uncover, I know that I am falling in love with you." The confession hung between them, beautiful and terrifying in its honesty. William drew her close, his arms encircling her, and for a long moment they simply held each other, drawing strength and comfort from their closeness. "I love you too," William whispered against her hair. "And when this is over, when your uncle is safe and justice has been served, I hope you will allow me to court you properly, to build a future together." "I would like nothing more," Eleanor replied, her voice muffled against his chest. The moment was interrupted by Judge Warren's gentle cough from the doorway. "It is time," the judge said kindly. "Let us go and set right what has been wronged." The first stop was Charles Blackwood's private residence, a grand townhouse in Beacon Hill. But the search there yielded nothing beyond evidence of expensive tastes and comfortable living. Blackwood himself was not present, having apparently fled after the incident at the bank. It was the bank itself, specifically its basement levels that were rarely accessed, where they finally found what they were seeking. The police, armed with Judge Warren's warrant, forced their way past protesting bank officials into the lower levels. The basement was a maze of storage rooms and old vaults, but William's detective instincts guided them unerringly toward an area that showed recent activity: fresh scratches on old locks, dust disturbed by frequent passage. Behind a heavy door secured with a new padlock, they found him. Jonathan Ashford was alive, though weakened by his 3-week ordeal. He was a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s, with silver hair and features that showed clear resemblance to Eleanor. When the door opened and light flooded into his prison, he blinked against the brightness, his expression transforming from despair to disbelief. "Eleanor?" His voice was hoarse from disuse. "My dear girl, is it truly you?" "Uncle Jonathan!" Eleanor rushed forward, falling to her knees beside the cot where he sat, her arms going around him in a fierce embrace. "Thank God you are alive. Thank God we found you." William watched the reunion with profound emotion, seeing the love between uncle and niece, the relief and joy of their reconnection. Judge Warren ordered the police to begin searching for Blackwood and any other conspirators, to seize all relevant documents from the bank's records. The conspiracy was unraveling, justice finally asserting itself. As Jonathan Ashford was helped from his prison and given water and medical attention, he looked at William with eyes that held both gratitude and assessment. "You are the detective who found me?" he asked. "I am William Hartford, sir," William replied, "though in truth, it was your niece's courage and determination that drove this investigation. She never stopped believing in you, never stopped searching for the truth." Jonathan's gaze moved between William and Eleanor, and something knowing and approving flickered in his expression. "I see," he said softly, "and I perceive that perhaps Eleanor has found more than just her missing uncle." Eleanor blushed but met her uncle's eyes steadily. "Uncle Jonathan, there is much we need to discuss. I have discovered certain truths about my family, about my parents." "I know," Jonathan interrupted gently, his hand covering hers. "And I'm ready to tell you everything, all the secrets I have kept for so long. You deserve the truth, Eleanor, all of it. But first, let us see this matter through to its conclusion. Let us ensure that Blackwood and his accomplices face justice for what they have done." The following weeks transformed Boston as the full scope of the conspiracy came to light. Charles Blackwood was apprehended attempting to board a ship bound for Europe, his luggage filled with documents and currency that provided damning evidence of the fraud he had orchestrated. Under pressure from Judge Warren and facing overwhelming proof of his crimes, Blackwood confessed to everything: the systematic embezzlement of trust funds over nearly a decade, the involvement of several prominent families who had been complicit in the scheme, and the decision to kidnap Jonathan Ashford when he threatened to expose them all. The scandal rocked Boston's financial establishment to its foundations. Newspapers ran daily headlines detailing the arrests, the amounts stolen, the betrayal of trust that had allowed such corruption to flourish unchecked. But through it all, William Hartford remained focused not on the public spectacle, but on the private resolution that mattered most to him, ensuring that Eleanor and her uncle found peace and the truth they had sought. It was a crisp November evening when Jonathan Ashford finally felt strong enough to fulfill his promise. He had spent 2 weeks recovering from his ordeal, regaining his strength and settling his affairs at the bank, which had immediately installed new management and begun the process of restitution to the defrauded estates. Now, as Eleanor and William sat with him in the library of the Ashford mansion, he prepared to reveal the secrets he had carried for more than 2 decades. "Eleanor, my dear," Jonathan began, his voice steady though his eyes reflected old pain. "I told you that your mother was my distant cousin, but that was a lie born of love and fear. Margaret was my sister, my only sibling, and you are my true niece by blood." Eleanor nodded, her hand finding William's where he sat beside her on the settee. "I know, Uncle Jonathan. We found the birth certificate you had hidden, but why conceal the truth? Why maintain such a fiction?" Jonathan's expression grew troubled as he gazed into the fire. "Because of who your father was, and the circumstances of your birth. Margaret fell in love when she was just 18, fell in love with a man who was already married, a man of great prominence in Boston society. Their affair was passionate, but doomed from the start. When Margaret discovered she was carrying his child, carrying you, the man refused to acknowledge you or provide for you in any way. He feared the scandal would destroy his political ambitions and his marriage to a woman from an even more powerful family." The room was utterly silent save for the crackling of the fire. Eleanor's face had grown pale, but she held herself with remarkable composure. "And my mother? What became of her?" "Margaret was devastated," Jonathan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She was cast out by polite society, labeled a fallen woman. Our parents, your grandparents, disowned her entirely. I was the only one who stood by her. I brought her here to this house, cared for her through her pregnancy and your birth. But the shame, the heartbreak, the rejection, it destroyed her spirit. She developed a fever shortly after you were born, and though I summoned the finest doctors, she never recovered. With her dying breath, she made me promise to protect you, to hide the truth of your parentage, so that you would never suffer the stigma she had endured." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, and William's arm went around her shoulders, holding her close as she processed these revelations. "And my father, who was he? Does he even know I exist?" Jonathan hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer and withdrew an envelope, yellowed with age. His name was Senator Robert Whitmore. He died 5 years ago, never having acknowledged you, never having shown the slightest interest in the child he fathered. I kept this letter, written by your mother shortly before her death, explaining everything. I always intended to give it to you when you were old enough to understand, but I was afraid that knowing would hurt you, afraid that you would feel the same rejection your mother felt." Eleanor took the letter with trembling hands but did not open it immediately. Instead, she looked at her uncle with eyes full of understanding and forgiveness. "You protected me, Uncle Jonathan. You gave me a home, a name, love, and security when I had nothing. You raised me as your own daughter in all but name, and I am grateful beyond measure. Whatever secrets you kept, they were kept out of love, and I will not condemn you for that." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears as he crossed the room and embraced his niece. "You are so like your mother, Eleanor. So strong, so forgiving, so full of grace. She would be so proud of the woman you have become." William watched the reunion with deep emotion, his own eyes suspiciously bright. To witness this moment of healing, of truth finally bringing peace rather than further pain, filled him with profound gratitude. Eleanor had faced every revelation with courage, had allowed love rather than bitterness to guide her response, and his admiration and love for her had only deepened with each passing day. As Jonathan and Eleanor separated, both wiping away tears, the older man turned his attention to William. "Detective Hartford, I understand I owe you an enormous debt. Without your dedication and skill, I would still be imprisoned in that basement, and this conspiracy would have continued unchecked. How can I possibly thank you?" William stood, his tall frame and steady presence commanding respect even as he spoke with humility. "Sir, your gratitude is appreciated but unnecessary. I was simply doing my duty as an investigator, though I confess that my motivation became rather more personal as the case progressed." Jonathan's knowing smile returned. "Indeed, I have eyes, young man, and I have seen the way you look at my niece, and the way she looks at you. There is love between you, unless I am very much mistaken." Eleanor blushed deeply, but she met her uncle's gaze with characteristic directness. "There is love, Uncle Jonathan. William and I have grown close through these trials, and he has asked permission to court me formally. I hope you will give us your blessing." "My blessing?" Jonathan laughed, the sound warm and genuine, perhaps the first truly joyful sound to emerge from him since his ordeal. "My dear Eleanor, you could not have chosen better. A man of honor, courage, and integrity, one who risked himself to save a stranger simply because it was right. I give my blessing most enthusiastically. Indeed, I rather think your mother, could she see you now, would approve wholeheartedly." The relief and joy that flooded through William was almost overwhelming. He had known that Eleanor returned his feelings, but to have her uncle's approval, to know that the path forward was clear, filled him with a happiness he had never expected to experience. He crossed to Eleanor and took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both courtly and deeply personal. "Eleanor Ashford," he said softly, his eyes holding hers. "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that doorway with secrets in your eyes. Every moment since has only deepened that love. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I would be honored if you would allow me to spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of you." "Oh, William," Eleanor whispered, her free hand coming up to touch his face with infinite tenderness. "You proved yourself worthy from the first moment. Your strength gave me courage, your dedication gave me hope, and your love has given me joy I never imagined possible. Yes, I will be courted by you. Yes, I will walk beside you into whatever future we build together." Jonathan discreetly withdrew from the library, leaving the couple alone. William drew Eleanor into his arms, and she came willingly, her head resting against his chest as they stood before the fire, holding each other close. For a long moment, neither spoke, content simply to be together, to feel the warmth and security of their embrace. "I cannot believe how much has changed in so short a time," Eleanor finally murmured. "A month ago, I was alone and terrified, my uncle missing, my world falling apart. Now Uncle Jonathan is safe, the truth has been revealed, justice has been served, and I have found love I never expected. Life has a way of surprising us," William replied, his lips brushing against her hair. "I spent years building walls around my heart, convinced that love and duty could not coexist, that caring too deeply would compromise my work. But you proved me wrong, Eleanor. You showed me that love does not weaken us, it strengthens us. It gives us something worth fighting for, worth protecting." Eleanor pulled back slightly to look up at him, her gray eyes luminous in the firelight. "Then let us fight for each other, William. Let us build a life together, a partnership of equals who face the world side by side." "Nothing would make me happier," William said, and then, unable to resist any longer, he lowered his head and kissed her. The kiss was everything their growing love had promised, tender yet passionate, gentle yet deeply felt. It spoke of shared trials overcome, of trust earned through adversity, of a connection forged in the fires of danger and discovery. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their hearts racing in perfect synchronization. The weeks that followed were filled with a happiness that seemed almost dreamlike after the intensity of their ordeal. William continued his detective work, but now he had Eleanor by his side during his investigations when she wished to accompany him, her intelligence and insight proving invaluable. Jonathan Ashford threw himself into reforming the banking practices that had allowed such corruption to flourish, working closely with Judge Warren to implement new oversight and protections. The stolen funds were largely recovered and returned to their rightful beneficiaries, though several prominent families faced ruin and scandal. But it was the quieter moments that William treasured most. Walking with Eleanor through Boston Common as autumn gave way to winter, the first snow falling softly around them as they discussed books and philosophy and their dreams for the future, sitting beside her at concerts where her love of music became evident in the way her eyes closed and her expression softened, dining with her and Jonathan, feeling for the first time in years what it meant to be part of a family. 3 months after Jonathan's rescue, on a crisp February evening in 1896, William Hartford once again stood in the library of the Ashford mansion. But this time, he was not there as a detective investigating a mystery. He was there as a man in love, preparing to take the most important step of his life. Jonathan sat in his favorite chair, a knowing smile on his face as William approached with obvious nervousness. Eleanor had been sent on an errand to the music room, giving William the privacy he needed for this conversation. "Sir," William began, his usual confidence deserting him in the face of this crucial moment, "I have come to ask formally for your niece's hand in marriage. I love Eleanor with all my heart, and I believe she loves me in return. I know I am merely a detective, not a man of great wealth or social standing, but I swear to you that I will spend every day of my life ensuring her happiness, protecting her, cherishing her, and being worthy of the extraordinary gift of her love." Jonathan stood and crossed to William, extending his hand. "William Hartford, you saved my life and helped restore my family's honor. More than that, you have proven yourself to be a man of exceptional character and integrity. Eleanor could not choose better, and I give you my blessing most gladly. Welcome to our family, son." The emotion that swept through William at those words, "Welcome to our family," was almost overwhelming. He shook Jonathan's hand firmly, seeing in the older man's eyes not just approval but genuine affection and respect. "Thank you, sir," William managed, his voice rough with feeling. "I will not disappoint you." "I know you will not," Jonathan replied warmly. "Now go, ask my niece properly, and let us have a celebration worthy of this joyous occasion." William found Eleanor in the music room as planned, standing before the tall windows that overlooked the snow-covered garden. She wore a dress of deep burgundy that complemented her coloring beautifully, and her hair was arranged in soft waves that framed her face. She turned as he entered, and the smile that lit her features made his heart skip a beat. "William," she said warmly, crossing to meet him, "Uncle Jonathan said you wished to speak with me." "I did," William replied, taking both her hands in his. "Eleanor, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have transformed me from a man who existed primarily for his work into someone who truly lives, who feels joy and hope and love more deeply than I ever imagined possible." Eleanor's eyes began to shimmer with tears as she seemed to sense what was coming. "William, please let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I am not a wealthy man, Eleanor. I cannot offer you mansions or jewels or a life of luxury. What I can offer you is my whole heart, my complete devotion, my unwavering commitment to your happiness. I can offer you a life of partnership and purpose, of facing the world together as equals, of building something beautiful and true." He released her hands and withdrew a small velvet box from his pocket, dropping to one knee before her. Opening the box revealed a ring, not ostentatious but elegant and beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that caught the lamplight and seemed to echo the remarkable color of Eleanor's eyes. "Eleanor Ashford," William said, his voice steady now with absolute certainty, "will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Eleanor's tears spilled over, but her smile was radiant with joy. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, William, 1,000 times yes. I want nothing more than to be your wife, to stand beside you, to build a life with you. You are everything I never knew I needed, everything I could ever want." William slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and drew her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both laughing through tears of happiness, Eleanor touched his face with wonder. "I love you so much," she whispered. "When you first came to my door that rainy evening, I was drowning in fear and loneliness. But you became my anchor, my strength, my hope. And now you will be my husband, my partner, my love for all the years to come." "And you," William replied, "appeared before me with secrets in your eyes, and you captured my heart completely. I came to solve a case, Eleanor, but what I found was so much more. I found the woman I had been waiting for my entire life without knowing it. I found you, and finding you, I found myself." Jonathan appeared in the doorway then, his face wreathed in smiles. "I take it the answer was favorable." "Uncle Jonathan," Eleanor laughed, running to embrace him, her left hand extended to show him the ring. "I am to be married. William and I are engaged." "Then we must celebrate properly," Jonathan declared, his joy matching theirs. "I shall have cook prepare a special dinner, And we shall toast to the future, to love triumphant, and to the family we have all found in each other. The engagement was announced formally the following week, and Boston society, or at least that portion of it not embroiled in the banking scandal, received the news with interest and approval. The wedding was planned for June, giving Eleanor and William time to prepare properly and to simply enjoy their engagement, these precious months of anticipation and planning. On a warm evening in early June 1896, as the last light of sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Eleanor Ashford became Eleanor Hartford in a ceremony attended by friends, colleagues, and those family connections who had stood by them through the trials of the previous year. Judge Warren officiated, his voice rich with emotion as he pronounced them husband and wife. Jonathan Ashford gave his niece away with tears of joy streaming down his face, and as William lifted Eleanor's veil and kissed her for the first time as his wife, there was not a dry eye in the small church. The reception was held at the Ashford mansion, now filled with flowers and music and laughter, rather than the shadows and secrets that had once haunted its halls. As William and Eleanor danced together for the first time as husband and wife, they were aware only of each other, of the love that bound them, of the journey they had traveled together from that first rain-soaked evening to this moment of pure happiness. "Mrs. Hartford," William murmured as they moved together to the music, "how does it feel to have a new name?" "It feels perfect," Eleanor replied, her eyes shining as she gazed up at her husband. "Though I think I shall always treasure the memory of being Eleanor Ashford, the woman who met a remarkable detective and fell in love with him while solving a mystery together. And I shall always treasure the memory of the evening I knocked on a door and found a woman with secrets in her eyes," William said softly. "A woman who proved to be so much more than I ever imagined. Brave, intelligent, compassionate, and beautiful inside and out. You transformed my life, Eleanor. You taught me to love again, to hope again, to believe that happiness was possible, as you did for me," Eleanor whispered. "We saved each other, William. We found each other in the darkness and brought each other into the light." As the evening wore on and the celebration continued around them, Jonathan Ashford stood with Judge Warren, watching the newlyweds with satisfaction and deep contentment. "They make a fine couple," the judge observed. "Hartford is a good man, and Eleanor is an exceptional young woman. They will be happy together." "They will indeed," Jonathan agreed, "and I am grateful beyond measure that out of such darkness, my kidnapping, the conspiracy, all those terrible secrets, such light has emerged. Eleanor knows the truth about her parentage now, and rather than destroying her as I feared, it has freed her. She understands that she is not defined by the circumstances of her birth, but by the choices she makes and the love she gives and receives. Truth has a way of being liberating," Judge Warren mused. "Even painful truth, when faced with courage, can lead to healing and growth. Your niece and her husband have both demonstrated remarkable courage throughout this ordeal." As the evening drew to a close and the guests began to depart, William and Eleanor prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a month-long journey to New York, and then to the countryside, where they would stay at a cottage William had rented, a place of peace and beauty, where they could begin their married life in tranquility. But before they left, Eleanor sought out her uncle one last time, embracing him tightly. "Thank you, Uncle Jonathan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for everything you have done for me, for all the sacrifices you made, for the love you have shown me throughout my life. I am who I am because of you." "No, my dear," Jonathan replied, his own voice unsteady. "You are who you are because of your own strength, your own character, your own remarkable spirit. I merely had the privilege of watching you grow into the extraordinary woman you have become. Be happy, Eleanor. Be happy with your William, and know that wherever your mother is, she is watching over you with joy and pride." As William and Eleanor's carriage pulled away from the mansion, heading toward their future together, they sat close together, Eleanor's head resting on William's shoulder, his arms secure around her. The evening stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. "We have a whole lifetime ahead of us," Eleanor murmured contentedly. "A lifetime of love and partnership and adventure. What shall we do with it, my darling husband?" "We shall live it fully," William replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We shall face whatever challenges come together, shall celebrate every joy together, shall build a home and perhaps, God willing, a family together. We shall continue working, I with my investigations, you with whatever pursuits bring you fulfillment. We shall be partners in all things, equals in love and respect and devotion. That sounds perfect, Eleanor sighed. Absolutely perfect. And as their carriage carried them through the streets of Boston toward their new life together, both William and Eleanor felt the profound truth that sometimes the greatest mysteries lead not just to solved cases and justice served, but to discoveries far more precious. The discovery of love, of partnership, of two souls finding each other and recognizing that together they were complete. The detective had only wanted to solve the case, but he had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found the woman with secrets in her eyes, and in finding her, had found his heart, his home, and his happiness. And Eleanor, who had begun this journey alone and afraid, had found not just the truth about her family and her past, but had found the love and partnership that would carry her through all the years to come. Their story, which had begun with disappearance and mystery, ended as all the best stories do, with love triumphant, truth revealed, and two hearts joined together in a bond that would endure through all the trials and joys that life would bring. They had faced danger together, had overcome obstacles together, and now they would face the future together, walking side by side into whatever adventures awaited them. In the Ashford mansion, Jonathan stood alone in the library, looking at the portrait of his sister Margaret that hung above the mantel. "She found love, Margaret," he said softly to the painted image. "Your daughter found the love you were denied, and she is happy. Rest peacefully now, dear sister, knowing that Eleanor's story has a far happier ending than yours did. She is loved, she is cherished, and she will live the life of joy and fulfillment that you deserved, but never had the chance to experience." And in that moment, as if in answer, a gentle breeze stirred through the room despite all the windows being closed, and Jonathan smiled, feeling his sister's presence one last time, her spirit finally at peace knowing that her daughter had found her happy ending. The mystery had been solved, justice had been served, love had conquered all. And in the heart of Boston, on that perfect June evening in 1896, all was exactly as it should be.